Welcome to 5 Dubs by MDDC Press. I'm your host, Rebecca Snyder, the Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, and DC Press Association, which represents news media in our region. 5 Dubs focuses on the who, what, when, where, and why of local news media. We'll talk with the journalists about the stories behind the news. You can find more information about our guests in the show notes or on our website, www.5-dubs.com. Welcome. I am so excited to have Jeremy Cox, who is a reporter for the Chesapeake Bay Journal, in the studio today. Welcome, Jeremy.
Hey, good to be here. Good to see you.
Yeah, no, it's great to see you. And it's also great to hear about the things that you're doing. And so you're a little bit on the other side of the table this time because you're here to talk about your 2 podcasts that you run for the Chesapeake Bay Journal. One is Chesapeake Uncharted, and then the other is the Bay Journal Newscast. So tell us a little bit. Let's start with the newscast because that's the one that just launched in June, correct?
Correct.
All right. So tell us about it and why.
Yeah. So we started the newscast as kind of a way for people to get their Bay environmental news in a different way. Not everybody is, as we know, is down necessarily with receiving, paper in their mailbox or even looking at pixels on a screen. And we thought, this can be a way to reach that audience. And for those who maybe also get, us in print or read us online, to, round out that coverage, to give them something more than they otherwise would. And from a production perspective, we can get into it. The 2 podcasts that you mentioned are produced very differently. And this one is a lot less labor intensive, shall we say. So we can ensure that it gets out in a more timely way to people.
So when you, there's 2 things that are just sparking for me right now. And I want to understand sort of the labor intensive aspect of it. And then I want to talk about covering the Chesapeake Bay as an infrastructure system. Because I think that's a really unique and interesting beat. But let's go down to the tactical stuff first, and then we can get esoteric.
Right. From a production standpoint, then the newscast is, you use Riverside. We thought about using it, and we may still use it one day, but we happen to use Zoom. So if you've been on a Zoom call before, you can produce this podcast. And so we get 3 of us, reporters or editors or whatever our titles are, and we set some time aside. Takes about 30 minutes to have our conversation. We don't have a script per se. We have our scripted opening and our scripted outro and sort of little beats that we hit. Okay, it's time for this segment and that segment. But so the rest of it is pretty free flowing. And so that's obviously a lot easier than a scripted show where you have to sit down and spend hours perhaps writing out your script, and I'm happy to talk about later how we do that with Uncharted. But you sit down, you have your conversation, and then it's pretty much done. From a production standpoint on the backside, it's just going through, listening for the ums and the uhs and the parts where you had to start again, and cleaning it up, adding your music, and you're good to go pretty much. So very easy. I can usually edit it in, 20, 30 minutes. And that's me being slow with Audition. I'm still transitioning from Audacity to Audition. So
all the A's, very confusing sometimes.
Yeah. I'll have the word audio in it.
So, when you are thinking about this conversation, and I'm a big fan of just the unscripted, authentic conversation, because I think
here we are.
Then you can, and here we are. Like, that's the way I like to do our podcast as well, because I think that it brings a really different aspect to the topic or the person that you're hearing. And so you have. So when you and are you planning to do this on a weekly or monthly basis? I know it's still so new. You're probably figuring that out a little bit.
Yeah.
But how do you decide? You guys are covering an awful lot. You've got a lot of different voices there.
Mhm.
What bubbles up to kind of make it into that need to know dive? Because
Mhm.
in the big scheme of things, 30 minutes, it's not that long when people are nattering around.
Yeah,
So how do you
it's
decide?
yeah, no, that 30 minutes definitely flies, and we've tried to keep it around 25, 26 minutes.
Hmm.
Because you're thinking, okay, how long is somebody's commute? That's kind of the thinking behind the length of time there. And it's a monthly, since you asked. And I think that's kind of for us because we're on a monthly schedule with our publication. We come out 10 times a year in print. So basically monthly. So that kind of made sense from that standpoint. So each one kind of looks ahead. We generally come out uh around I think it's the first of every month, and it's looking ahead to that next issue that's going to land.
Hmm.
From our standpoint, we've just finished it, we've put it to bed, but it's still in production from a paper standpoint. And so we catch you, but right before it's going to hit the newsstands. And then
Hmm.
as far as what subjects we like to cover, it hasn't been too hard lately because of events in our watershed, like the big spill in the Potomac of the Potomac Interceptor. So that's been national
Oh,
news.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but it's a pretty quick conversation. We kind of put our heads together, a week or so before we talk. What's the big story you're working on this month? And then we go, yep, that's number one. And then we want, if we have our Pennsylvania reporter, they're going to talk about Pennsylvania. If Lauren's always going to be on, she's our co-host, Lauren Hines
Hmm.
Acosta. So she's going to talk about Virginia. I'm going to usually talk about Maryland. So then it's just making sure that we're kind of covering our geographies. If you're in Virginia, Pennsylvania, Maryland, maybe even DC, we're going to cover, you know, at least three of those areas, sometimes
Hmm.
Delaware. So, yeah,
Delaware's a big part of the watershed too, for
right.
sure. And
We're
so,
at DDC after all.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So I'm just curious because I think for some people who aren't really familiar with the Chesapeake Bay Journal, the way you're approaching this topic is really, in some ways, radically different than sort of a traditional legacy publication that would have, that is really kind of bordered around geography. So you'd be like
Yeah,
a Maryland paper. I think it's really unusual because you have coverage throughout the entire watershed. And for some of our listeners, including me,
yeah,
it's been a while since I've taken environmental science. So refresh us. Like, where does the watershed begin? And tell us about
yeah.
the magic of the Chesapeake Bay,
Magic.
and how it relates to your coverage area.
Right. Well, so geography still plays a role, right? And as you said, we are based around a watershed, which is different from most publications, right? Where you say, okay, we're this state or this tri-county area or whatever. And so the watershed is 64,000 square miles. And so the watershed is basically defined as, wherever a raindrop hits in this area, it could conceivably find its way to the Chesapeake Bay, as opposed to the Mississippi River Basin or the Ohio or Delaware Bay or something like that. So it generally follows from, top to bottom. Cooperstown, New York is the
Hmm.
headwaters, and kind of a big, huge blob going down to the eastern side of West Virginia, down through Virginia, and not quite the south side there, cutting over around the Appomattox River, over to the James River, to the mouth right there at Virginia Beach, right
Hmm.
there. And then on the east side, pretty much all of Maryland except that very northeastern, northeast part, and running down pretty much the center line, more or less, of the Delmarva Peninsula.
Hmm.
And if you want to get nerdy for a minute, I mean, that's the
I
watershed,
do.
but there's also the air shed where air
Ooh.
blows, and the stuff that's in that air can make its way to the Chesapeake Bay, and that actually goes up into Canada a little bit, over to Michigan. But we're not going to do that anytime soon. We've covered it a little bit when it came to the lawsuits about Maryland suing Western states to our west about
Mhm.
polluted power plants. But yeah, generally we don't cover the airshed the way we cover the watershed. So sorry.
But I'm glad there's another frontier out there. I mean, you can
Yes, we can
always,
grow.
always do it. Well, and
Ohio
it just,
will come into play.
so actually, Jeremy, my first dumb question of the day, like, does every raindrop in the world somehow go to some watershed?
Yep.
There's probably not a raindrop that falls that doesn't like drift somewhere. So
Right.
that's kind of a topographical, really interesting piece to think about where things flow.
Right.
So when you're covering, you're covering Cooperstown probably doesn't necessarily see itself intrinsically as part of the Chesapeake Bay
Yep.
watershed.
Right.
Certainly in when you're close enough to the water to get to it easily, like
Mhm.
of course you think, like I live in Baltimore and all of the storm drains are like
Right.
drains to the Chesapeake Bay. So it's really at the forefront. But when you're covering such a large geographic area, how do you kind of contend with the idea that people don't see themselves as part of that system that you're covering? Like, does that matter?
Right. I mean, newspapers historically set themselves up in geographies because people in the Baltimore area thought of themselves as, Baltimorean or Baltimore adjacent, even though they
Hmm.
lived in York, Pennsylvania, or, you know, or Carroll County or something like that. So you definitely put your finger on something there. How do you take this, area with 18 million people in it and say, okay, we're all revolving around this waterway that may not, be something that you see on a day-to-day basis. You may not even see it for years. And so that's why we often use the term watershed. We're very careful to say
Hmm.
the Chesapeake Bay watershed or the region or the Mid-Atlantic even, because there is some waterway in your backyard. If you're, getting our publication, there's some creek, a ditch, whatever that does, you know, interact with your life that you care about. That through, the wonders and magic of hydrology has a connection, a surface connection or a, groundwater connection to water bodies that do feed into the Chesapeake Bay. So, the Susquehanna River goes all the way up. There's two different prongs of it, and it does loop in, southern New York there with Binghamton and with Cooperstown, as I said. And so, yeah, they may not feel a connection in their day to day lives to the estuary itself, but we're
Hmm.
constantly, that's why we report on not just the bay, but here we are reporting from, the wilds of Pennsylvania or Western Maryland. And this is, we have kind of this uh, trick. Well, you got to throw the bay in there somewhere, right? Or explain geographically, okay, Antietam Creek, which flows into the Potomac River, which is one of the major tributaries of the bay. And sometimes you have to go like 5 or 6 steps, and you maybe don't list them all, but you jump. Okay, well, it flows into other waterways, but we're
Yeah,
always
you
trying
got a daisy
to
chain
say,
it.
yeah, exactly. So you're kind of always reminding readers, okay, look, this is why this area is connected, why you should care, hundreds of miles away.
Right. Well, and I wanted to go back to that idea of how you cover that. So I don't know if you've read the local news network report out of the University of Maryland, um, News People Need. But I was happened to be at their little launch summit maybe 2 weeks ago and heard sort of the way to make news more relevant to audiences. And I think they've done some really interesting
Mm.
things with human-centered design surveying to understand how people interact with the news that's in their lives. And one of the big things was that people need to understand sort of the infrastructure and hidden forces that are shaping their lives. So like the systems. So, and I think traditional journalism is looking at, oh, we're going to do state politics, or we're going to do crime, or we're going to do the environment, but not looking at the criminal justice system or not looking at the federal government or or the municipal government or religion as a beat, or and I think that you all are sort of just in the way that you've developed are taking that kind of systems approach with the way that you approach the watershed. And so I know that I wanted to understand a little bit more about how the Chesapeake Bay Journal kind of sees itself and what your mission is
Mhm.
in terms of your reporting and how you manage to do all of those things. Because reporting on a system is really big.
Yeah.
It's not easy, and you're doing it with a really small staff.
Yeah.
So let's peer back behind the curtain.
No, I love what you're saying with that report. I can't wait to read it myself. And I'm a little bit in academia myself. I'm an adjunct communications professor, so at Salisbury University here in
Hmm.
Maryland. So I get in. It enables me to think in some ways, that maybe a typical reporter doesn't. Because we're missing that link often between the scholarly world and the applied world of journalism. So I'm excited to hear that
Yes.
they have something that really speaks directly to what we're doing. But as far as the Bay Journal goes, right, I think I love and I hate this term. We often throw around, we call it slow journalism.
Mm,
So we're not going to be able to cover. I mean, and this breaks my heart as a tried and true daily, born and bred reporter. I want to be first. I want to break that news. And since we're a monthly, yeah, I mean, we have a website and we do break news from time to time, but it's not our bread and butter. And it can't be, right? We just don't have the staff for it. Still means
mhm,
my heart does break when I'm like, I wish I could have gotten to that. But you just have to tell yourself that's not our, MO. Our MO is, I think you put your finger on it, telling the story of a system of, you know, uh, clarifying and elucidating this mystery of how the environment works and how humans interact with that environment. And that can take on, many different, avenues, from state government, all those traditional beat reports, right? State government, federal government, uh, and even the traditional, features type coverage, down to like sport fishing and that sort of thing. What are they seeing and experiencing? And so you're almost writing business stories about the commercial,
mhm,
seafood industry and that sort of thing. And so all the things that your journalism professor taught you, like, write stories, don't write articles, that definitely, is what we're trying to do. And that daily coverage is great. It's absolutely vital. I'm here for it. But, you often end up writing about the latest turn of the screw. So you have, 4 to 5,
right.
6, fresh paragraphs, and then all the stuff you wrote last week below that. And
Mhm,
I find I don't get to, rehash hardly ever, because I'm writing about something new and different, or it's been so long since I covered it that, I only have one paragraph that's basically restating, and it's all new and it's new to me. And if it's new to me, it's new to the reader there. So I think that's what's exciting about us is, you really are learning something new all the time. It might have sort of the basic outlines, but the you have a new lens on it with every story.
right. Well, it's constantly shifting. And so the when you're and I think the way that you've approached your podcasts, and let's just make sure everybody who's listening knows that they can go to
Right,
bayjournal.com.
right.
And then you can look at podcasts, and there's the newscast, and then Uncharted, Chesapeake Uncharted. When you're though, I feel like these are both, they're different kind of storytelling. Newscast is that top line, like, here's what you need to know. Are you kind of trying to drive people to the print or the the website, or is it really, are you trying to make it truly a standalone that if people just want to interact with the podcast, they have enough to
Yeah,
to be actionable in their life?
yeah. Yes and yes. So we go at it as if, like, this is the only thing that you may hear about this. You may never see us in print. So absolutely we want it to stand on its own. But we say, in our podcast, certainly, hey, if you want to hear more, or sorry, not here, but if you want to learn more
Mhm.
about this, more, that we can get to in this 5 minutes, certainly bayjournal.com, or sign up for a subscription so you get that print edition. So yeah, I'd say we're trying to do both there. If you just want to listen to the podcast, great. Or if you want to find out more, we want to make sure you have, you're hearing, okay, this is what the next step is.
Right. And then the Chesapeake Uncharted, that seems like and I've only listened to an episode or two there, but it feels like you're really kind of going deeper and kind of filling out maybe like the story that you went with. Maybe you're filling in the color around it and really giving others an opportunity to kind of highlight what's important to
Yeah.
them. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, so it's tougher to wrap your head around it because each season is a little different, and
Hmm.
not just in how they're reported, but the summer there's one season that's all interviews, for example. So they're quite different. I
Hmm.
think what's different about Uncharted, though, historically has been very much audio first. Those stories
Mm.
came about because that season or that particular episode was reported really with audio in mind, whereas newscast is us sitting around talking about what we've been doing for the print product, for the web product. And so still storytelling, still the environment there, but that's kind of, coming from this direction at it. And so Uncharted is it's still around. We haven't come out with a season. We do one generally one a year, but
Hmm.
it's evolving now just because of the again, workflow issues. Like now we are on a separate track producing little radio feature stories that can be plugged right into NPR type
Oh,
news.
I see. Hmm.
Yeah. So we've just started that. We're about 3 or 4 in now. And so again, it parallels what we do on the print side and the digital side, which is we make our content available. And if you're in the news business, in case you didn't know, we have the Bay Journal News Service, which is sort of like the Associated Press, but it's our content about the Bay. And anybody is welcome to run it as long as they, just give us proper attribution,
Hmm.
byline, all that. And photographs as well, by the way. So same thing, same idea, but now with audio. And we've, reached out to and, forged relationships with NPR, local NPR stations, and other local news that happen to go out across the radio. And so now we're collecting these little story packages, and generally these are done in parallel in my reporting process, and Lauren is producing these as well in tandem with a print article. So I go out and I've got my recorder, and basically your reporter becomes your notebook. And what's
Hmm.
great with technology now is the AI can go and give you the transcript, and yay, that saves you a
Oh,
step.
yay, transcripts. Love them.
Because for that, boy, to have to go, I mean, I'm sure, have done it, had to go through and listen to your audio and all the time it takes. It just wouldn't be possible without it. So that's great. And then you produce your print story, you produce your radio story, you edit them all up. And so now what Uncharted is going to be is once we get sort of about 25 minutes, 30 minutes of content, we'll group those together, and it'll be, here's what we've been producing, and, kind of like This American Life, uh,
Hmm.
where here's a different, 5 minute story, and they're all put together.
Yeah,
Um,
sort of like
all
snapshots.
about Yeah, all about the Bay. But we want to make sure that, yes, people are hearing this content, this radio content, out in the world, maybe when they're driving in their particular location, but we wanted to make sure that people could find them in one place. If you didn't have to live in Virginia Beach and be listening to WHRO in order to hear this report. Now, I know
Mhm.
you can, through the magic of the internet, you can hunt for it if you wanted, or see it in your socials or whatever, but here's one place, and so Uncharted is going to be that place for that.
Oh, I like that, and I mean, it makes sense to kind of put it all in one aggregated place because it's all
Yeah.
your content. Um,
Yeah,
so
and quick, it definitely it's not like brand new to Uncharted because the first couple seasons and really the most recent, the fourth season, were that kind of magazine style. Okay, you're going on me, at my elbow on a reporting trip. So it will, you want to make sure you're not making a hard left or hard right here. So I think it still fits with the DNA of that particular brand.
right. Well, and yeah, I mean, you're kind of cultivating just different. These are snapshot stories as opposed to
Mhm.
like when you did Agnes, like that was a season
Yeah,
all about a specific incident,
right,
and then you went in different directions.
right.
I'm curious though because you've done print for a long time. Um, how different it is, like when you're switching gears to write for print and then repackage that story for audio and then talk about maybe that story in the podcast.
Mhm.
Are there what different approaches do you take for different mediums?
Yeah. That's a constant conversation you need to have with yourself. A lot of people it seems like it's very daunting, but then you hear, okay, a lot of people in radio came from print, and okay, they've trailblazed that path. It is possible. So if you're listening to this right now, here's yet more living proof. You can do it. You can edit. You can tell these stories. You can capture audio. Um, it's not
You just
as
have to get over hearing your
yeah,
voice,
yes,
which I
that's
think is the hardest thing.
legit the worst part, right?
Yeah.
But I think if I just kind of boil it down to one nugget, it's that when you're telling a radio style piece versus a print piece, um, the print, you have your little, let's say your feature, you've got your two, three, four graphs, and then your nut graph, and okay, then you go from there. Whereas radio, you have your anchor intro, and that's sort of usually your summary lead almost. You're kind of giving up
Mhm.
most of your gold coins up front. Okay, this is what this is about. But then when you dive into the package itself then and it cuts to you in the field or whatever, or whatever it is, your nut graph then is at the end. And so, you're going on this journey, you're following, you're withholding a lot. And, it's not that second graph. Okay, I quick gotta, put this in your face or else you're gonna leave. There's a
Mhm.
little bit of an expectation there that the listener is going to, you've got them, okay, they're gonna stick with you now. It's not as hard as reading, you're just listening. And so then it just becomes a matter of keep engaging them with interesting details and you know ear catching sounds and pulling them through until you do get this payoff toward the end that is your nut graph. This is why all this mattered, and it's all tying together nicely. So I think that was kind of the hardest part for me, was just to relax and let the story tell itself, not impose the print style onto something that it doesn't work that way.
Right. No, and that makes perfect sense because in the news in a print newspaper, you want to like, okay, you want to tell them what it's about, and then if they want to continue to move on and read through, they can get more detail. But you are kind of pulling people along, and I think for um, for listeners, when you're working in an auditory space, they're
Mhm.
more willing to walk with you,
Mhm.
especially if you have sort of inventive or interesting audio. So, you can not kind of make a silk purse out of a sow's ear when you're working in print with your interviews. But how do you make, or how do you encourage or unlock people's quotes, like when you're directly quoting them in audio? Like, do you have any special tricks for, how you make that those interviews come alive?
Yeah. I think it's the same. As much as I like to talk about how they're different animals, I think the same quotes that jump out to you in audio are the ones that will jump out to you in print as well, usually. And I know this because I'll write one script or the other first. I still haven't figured
Mhm.
out, like, oh, is it smarter to do it this way or the other? I'm still experimenting, but it does seem to be like if I'm using a quote over here in the print side, pretty good chance, you know, space notwithstanding, that I'm going to use it on the other side as well. And
Hmm.
I think the only thing that's different is like if a quote sounds a little bad, it doesn't really matter, in print. You can fix it,
Right.
cut out a certain part of it or whatever. But if it's, you got some bad background noise, or they stumble it up a little bit, then it's harder to use in audio. Obviously, you only get that one shot, and so if you hear that good quote, sometimes you're listening in your ears and you go, oh gosh, this is just that just isn't going to work there. You need to make sure in the moment, okay, let's go back and hit that again. Can you explain to me again, what this
Hmm.
is about, so that you do get it in real time? Because just like photography, once you go home, you're not getting any more material from the field. So you got to make sure that you get it there. So that's probably the biggest difference as far as quotes
Right.
go.
Now, you're taking photos as well? Like you're the triple threat these days, right?
Yeah, sometimes we do video. As part of all this, we're like, okay, maybe video, we can kind of tap the brakes on that a little bit. So there's a little bit of give, but if it calls for it, we certainly have that in our back pocket. For example, the Potomac Interceptor sewage break, I did a little 1 minute video for that. So a little bit more quick hits, taking advantage of those YouTube shorts, and hopefully the
Hmm.
algorithms and all that will appreciate that. But yeah, so when I'm out in the field, I try not to do too much, but there's always got to be a print story, right? That's the bread and butter, of course. But then, okay, does it make sense to do audio? Some stories lend themselves to it, and others don't. And
Hmm.
yeah, so if it does seem to lend itself, I'm out in the field with somebody. There's a process that's going on that I can document, um, something surprising happening, and of course sound, lively, engaging, interesting sound, then that's when you can say, okay, I'm going to reach across. And again, it's not the hardest thing in the world. Your Zoom report, and this is Zoom, the recorder version. It's weird that it's the same name as the app that we use, but
Oh, right. Yes.
the Zoom
I always forget about.
recorder,
Yep.
that's basically, it's $80 or something like that, $100, probably now with inflation, 120. But anyway, one of those is great, and get the right kind of mic for it, or just use the mic that comes with it, and you're good to go. And it's really, if you think audio first when you're out doing the reporting, again, because you can't go back and recapture sound, that's probably the way to do it. And the print stuff will be in there. I think the
Hmm.
main difference is sometimes for print, there's details, right? Audio, you kind of get this top 20-30% of the story. In print, dives into that last 70 to 80%. And so you got to make sure to ask those print type questions to winnow out those details that you'll need. But other than that, the reporting is pretty much the same.
That's good to know, because I feel that all those lines blurring, and different stories not maybe require, but are better suited for different mediums. And
Yeah.
so the more facile people can be in crossing those divides, I think the stronger the storytelling can be.
Yep.
Um, and you're in this really unique position because you're also an adjunct at Salisbury. So I'm you have like you get to be all these pearls of wisdom just flowing out of your
Right.
mouth all the time.
Yeah.
So, and because you've seen this business change a lot, what what would you tell younger Jeremy? Like, what would you tell college age Jeremy about this business?
Yeah, don't be afraid of technology and the changes in technology. I think growing up in this business, when I entered it, uh, newspapers had websites. They would update them maybe at, the stroke of midnight every day, the old days of
Hmm.
drag and drop, if you will. Um, and I was always like, well, I kind of understand, like, theoretically, that it's important to know things beyond just how to use your word processing program. But like, I think for too long I was kind of afraid of adapting, or adopting a different storytelling method that involved a different technology, just because,
Mm.
you look at the learning curve and it's like, oh my gosh, I mean, not only do I need to figure out all these, bleeps and bloops and what this button does and how not to screw it up and not sound like a complete amateur, but also like, yes, it's a different storytelling. I've been doing it this way. Can an old dog learn new tricks and all this sort of thing? And it's like, just get over yourself and, try it, watch some YouTube videos, take some classes. There was a great one that I took I guess asymmetrically is the word. It was on demand, we'll say, and
Oh,
really helped me.
asynchronous is, I think, what the kids
Asynchronous.
say.
Oh my goodness! See, that's why we pay you the big bucks. Asynchronous. I took it, and it really helped me kind of jump the line. I did.
Mhm.
You know, so if you have the opportunity, if it costs a few bucks, it'll be money well spent to take a class in. Okay, how do you use editing software or do digital storytelling or, tell a radio story, that kind of thing. Because I think storytelling is storytelling. And I tell that to my students because we do a lot of different things in this intro to mass media class, mass media writing, from writing tweets to writing, scripts for teleplays and everything in between. And I'm like, at the end of the day, the human mind is hardwired for good stories. Uh,
Mhm.
Same way it's wired to caffeine or other types of drugs. We want that good hit of a good story. It's satisfying, and it doesn't matter if you're telling it in print or over radio or some online storytelling application. At the end of the day, you're giving people um what they want and what they need. Honestly, they want to learn about the world around them, and they want to learn about it in an engaging, exciting, and poignant way.
Yeah. And I think you're totally right that, content is always king, especially, we do a lot with local news
Mm.
in the press association, of course, in this podcast. Um, but local news is all about the stories that are there. It's just, news equals stories. And the format kind of can fall away because you're going to reach different people in different situations and different times. And if you don't have information kind of prepared in the format in which they're ready to meet you,
Mhm.
then you're both missing out.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's sage advice for the young Jeremy. Are
Yes.
your students picking that up, or are they still kind of really nervous about how they appear in the world or about like being perceived in the world?
Yeah, you think, oh, Gen Z, they're digital natives, right? And it's funny, not all of them act that way when it comes to the journalism, right? And I think it comes because, well, you major in journalism because or communications because uh, you know, engineering wasn't your thing or math wasn't your thing. And so you
Mhm.
bring something in that's adjacent to engineering and math. Okay, now you're gonna need to work this expensive camera equipment or learn this fancy editing software. And it's, oh, well, now I'm not so sure about that. I was just doing this writing thing, and now you're telling me to do this. And so that's always the leap is okay. It's gonna be fine. It's all storytelling. All we're doing here is we're putting it into a different box. That's it.
Yep.
So getting them over that hump is, yeah, don't you're definitely mistaken if you think, oh, the kids will figure it out. Some will, but more need a helping hand and encouragement than you would, just assume.
Yeah, and I would imagine your experience is really helpful there because you had to do some soul searching and sort of like, what am I doing here? What do I wanna
Yeah,
do?
yeah.
So I wanted to go back, like, what when you're sort of meeting readers or listeners where they are, what do you want them to take away from Bay Journal stories?
Yeah, I think we always have our mission at the forefront, right? We're independent, nonprofit. We're very much about while we do get grant money and some of it comes from the federal government, of not reporting, with any strings attached. So the big
Hmm.
thing is, let's give people, because there's a lot of noise out there coming from public relations, from the government itself, and from news that's honestly, I mean, I know people are working hard. I was a daily reporter and had to cover 2 to 3 stories a day, and you see stuff that just doesn't have the depth, or maybe is not exactly factually nailed down the right way. And so it's really a breath of fresh air and refreshing to see something that, if I can talk us up for a second, that has,
Please do.
yeah, um, that their reporters are actually bringing their own expertise, right? Because
Hmm.
the days of the beat reporting, as newsrooms have shrunk, beat reporting has unfortunately started falling by the wayside, right? Everyone's had to become a jack of all trades, master of none. And so here we are. This is all we do. And so, this is, Carl Blankenship's 5,000th story about nutrients in this particular Chesapeake Bay watershed. Carl's our founder, going back 30 years ago, an
Hmm.
incredible wealth of knowledge. People
Yes.
in the Bay program and scientists come to him with questions. He is a subject expert. Um, and so, I'm not there yet. And that was another thing that I would tell younger Jeremy is, put the anxiety away. Because when we would have these staff meetings and I'm the new guy, like, how do they know everything and know everybody? And how will I ever get there? And I've 5, 6 years now, 7 years now. And I'm like, okay, I'm at least seeing a glimmer now. Okay, it is possible to get there, but just be patient and keep doing, your stories, and it will get there. But yeah, I think that's what makes us special, and why the slow news is, it doesn't sound like it would be a great, intuitively, because right, it's a fast paced world, and how is this going to work? How are you going to monetize that? But I think our niche is filling in those gaps for, for communities, right? Gaps
Hmm.
in terms of, like, there's not as many reporters and not as many publications, so that's why we make our content available. But also gaps, even if you have reporters there, are they able to tell the stories as deeply as we can, with the context, that encyclopedic knowledge? Some can, but increasingly, many are unable to, given just the constraints of, modern newsrooms, if you have a physical newsroom even. So
Right.
I think that's our place, is telling those environmental stories the way no one else can.
No, I love that. And as we wind down, I want to hear your favorite story. You've been at the Bay Journal now like
No.
6, 7 years.
Yeah.
It's been a while. Oh gosh, yes.
This
So
takes
a little six,
trouble.
seven on that. And
Who doesn't?
what's your favorite story?
Yeah. um, I'll go back, recently, just because it was, oddly, most of us reporters get seasick very easily. So, uh,
Ooh, the irony.
throw Carl under the bus. The great Ad Crable, shout out. He would get, motion sickness, and I do as well. So, like, it's always an adventure when you're going out to some place, and the worst is just when you're bobbing along like a cork in the water, and that's precisely what you do if you're fishing for sharks, apparently.
Good to know.
So yeah, this was actually my first radio story, and I went out there. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to wear the patch behind my ear and all that. And so I go out with these scientists from VIMS, the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, and they're, catching sharks to be able to tag them and learn about them. And right there at the mouth of the bay, pretty much. And I mean, it hits me within like 20 minutes. I mean, I'm in the cockpit of the boat with no air in my face, and I'm like, oh, this is not great. And so basically, we're out there for 12 hours, and the entire 12 hours is just one of the top five, physically most, miserable times of my life. And, but I'm still, okay, we got to do the journalism. So I would go in these like 5-minute spurts every half an hour. Okay, I'm going to interview you. Okay, that's about all I can do. And these poor, lovely people that I'm with, these researchers who do this every day, are like, yeah, we feel you. It happens to the best of us, and they're being very nice about it. And I'm just so, uh, but just being able to, having done it, gotten back to land, kissed the ground, and gotten a pretty solid piece out of it, despite all I had to go through for it. I mean, it was a beautiful day, and waters couldn't have been quieter. But what I did learn was, and if this happens to you, it doesn't matter how much Dramamine you take. If you're already tired to start the day, I'd gotten up at 2 a.m. to drive down there. If you're already tired and fatigued, it ain't going to help.
I love that story of fortitude and stick-to-itiveness. I mean, not that you have a choice when you're out on the water for 12 hours, and the scientists are not going to turn around for some baby journalist who can't stay upright. They're just going to be like, puke over the side, it'll be fine. But I love that you were able to take that and then apply it, still get the story, still get it done, and wake up the next day and do it again. That's like the resilience of journalism right there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there are bigger stories out there, but we got to keep proving to ourselves every day why we get up, and that's one of those stories that does it for you. That's why we got into the business right there.
Well, truer words never spoken. Jeremy, thank you so much for coming to talk to me. If anybody still needs the URL, it's bayjournal.com, and the podcast is Newscast, which is under the podcast tab on the website. And I can't wait to hear more about what you're doing. So thank you so much for coming to talk to me.
Yeah, you're welcome. This was great.
Thanks for listening to 5 Dubs with Rebecca Snyder. Please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts so that others can find us. What do you want to know about local journalism? Email me at rsnyder, SNYDER, at mddcpress.com. Interested in supporting our podcast and journalism? Please donate to our 501c3 Press Foundation. Find out more and see the full episode list and show notes at www.5-dubs.com.